The laughter reached me before the words did, sharp, metallic, the kind of laughter men use when they think they're safe from consequences. It bled down the hallway like spilled champagne, bright and careless. I had only gone upstairs to fetch the scarf I'd forgotten on the bed, an ivory silk one Adrian insisted I not wear because it looked too plain. I was halfway down the stairs when I heard his voice. "Evelyn," he scoffed. "Come on, man, she's basically baggage. You know that type, quiet, broke, no ambition, sweet enough but nothing special." The stairway lights flickered softly against the polished banister. My hand froze on the wood. For a moment I couldn't tell whether the tremor in my chest was anger or confirmation. A truth I'd felt for years but never heard spoken out loud. "Baggage," he repeated, louder this time. "Honestly, she should be grateful I married her. I could have done better." The air thickened. A slow, cold bloom opened behind my ribs. I stayed perfectly still, absorbing the sting like a bee trapped against glass. His friend Todd, one of his golf buddies, let out a low whistle. "Does she know you think that?" "Of course not," Adrian said with a laugh. "You know Evelyn, she's too soft to realize anything." Soft, quiet, broke, baggage. Each word stacked on top of the last, forming a familiar tower I'd spent years pretending wasn't collapsing around me. I inhaled, slow and silent, letting the faint aroma of lemon polish and Adrian's expensive cologne sharpen the moment into something crystalline. Something I needed to remember. My scarf slipped from my fingers and fell quietly onto the step, and I realized, with a clarity that felt like stepping into cold water, that this was not the first fracture. Just the first one spoken out loud. Before we continue this story, I have a small favor to ask. Please leave a comment telling us which city or country you are listening from today. I love reading where our community is from. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe to help us bring you more fascinating stories. I forced my breathing steady and descended the remaining steps, letting the fabric of the staircase runner soften each step. Neither of them noticed me until I reached the bottom and stepped into view. Todd blanched, eyes widening. Adrian's smile faltered. "Evie," he said, recovering quickly. "Thought you were upstairs reading." My voice came out level, too level. "I forgot my scarf." I didn't give him the satisfaction of pausing. I didn't ask him to explain. I didn't even look at him as I walked past the doorway and into the kitchen. But inside, something old and quiet stirred. I had spent years convincing myself his little jabs were stress, or immaturity, or the influence of his mother. Cassandra always encouraged him to aim higher, and she never hesitated to remind me that I wasn't what she envisioned for her only son. A wife, yes, but not a match. I filled a glass of water at the sink. The cold tap sputtered before releasing a steady flow. My fingertips stung from gripping the counter. "Baggage," I whispered under my breath, tasting the word like acid. No tears came. I was long past tears, only a hollow, expanding quiet. It pressed against my ribs, reminding me of a truth I had buried the day I signed my marriage certificate. I was not broke. I was not helpless. I was not his responsibility. If anything, he had been mine. My gaze drifted to the drawer beside the refrigerator, the one Adrian never bothered to open. It was filled with papers he found boring and old-fashioned, which suited me fine. Among them were letters addressed in elegant ink, sealed with the faint crest of my family. A small oak tree enclosed within a circle. I pulled the drawer open slowly. The smell of paper, aged, slightly sweet, grew stronger as I picked up the first envelope. The Marlowe estate attorney, Jonathan Drayton. I hadn't touched these letters in over a year. My fingers trembled slightly as I slid the top one free. The paper had softened over time, its edges a little curled. I remembered receiving it shortly after Adrian and I married. I had read it once, then tucked it away, telling myself I didn't need to think about it. Now the words felt heavier. I unfolded it carefully. "Evelyn, per the conditions set forth by your parents, your inheritance access remains suspended until your husband's character can be demonstrated as honorable and supportive. If he acts in bad faith, emotionally, financially, or morally, you are entitled to full reinstatement of the estate holdings without marital inclusion. Please contact me when a determination becomes necessary." I exhaled. Slowly, my pulse thudded behind my ears in a steady, deliberate drum. All these years, I had tried to protect Adrian from the truth of who I was, of what marriage to me could actually mean. I'd wanted him to love me for myself, not for the legacy I was born into. But he had never loved me. He loved the idea of superiority. Control. He loved being the one who had rescued the quiet girl with simple dresses and soft smiles. Baggage. The word sliced through the fog. I opened the second letter. Then the third, each one sharpened the shape of my situation. If Adrian had ever shown real kindness, if he had chosen humility, if he had treated me as an equal, everything, the estate, the properties, the investments, the Marlowe name, would have been ours to share. But instead, he had failed a test he never knew he was taking, a test my parents had crafted with ruthless, old-fashioned precision, a test I had hoped, foolishly, desperately, that he would pass. I sank into a kitchen chair, letting the dim amber light pool onto the table. Dust motes drifted lazily in the beam of the overhead pendant. Outside, a distant car honked. A dog barked in a neighboring yard. Life continued, unaware that mine was shifting beneath my feet. The truth rose slowly, like water filling a glass. I wasn't powerless. I had never been powerless. I had simply been patient. I thought back to the early days, the bouquet he brought on our first date, the way he held my waist like I was fragile, precious. But those gestures had chipped away over time. Each insult disguised as a joke, each backhanded remark at parties, each time he dismissed my opinions, it all stacked into the shape of a marriage sculpted from condescension. A marriage built on a false foundation. A foundation he had assumed I could never shake. Footsteps sounded in the hallway. I straightened the letters, sliding them back into the envelopes just as Adrian entered. He leaned against the doorframe, trying for nonchalance, but his eyes flickered with a hint of worry. "You heard something," he said. It wasn't a question, it was an early defense. "I heard enough," I replied softly. My tone made him pause just for a moment. He expected tears or pleading. He expected softness. But what he found instead was stillness. A new kind of stillness. "Evelyn," he said, forcing a laugh, "don't tell me you're taking a joke seriously. Todd knows I'm kidding." "Do you?" I asked. His jaw tightened a fraction. He hated when I asked questions he couldn't control. "Evie, come on, don't make this dramatic." My heartbeat slowed. Steadied, I felt strangely like I was waking up for the first time in years. Inside my chest, something clicked into place. Not anger, not yet, just clarity. "I'm not making anything dramatic," I murmured. "Just listening." He didn't understand the meaning behind those words. I watched the confusion flit across his face, the slight furrow of his eyebrow, the quick swallow. He sensed something was different, but he didn't know what. Not yet. "If you're upset," he continued, "we can talk about it tomorrow. I'm heading out again tonight with Todd. It's important." Everything was always important when it didn't involve me. "I see," I said, and I did. I saw everything. He hesitated like he wanted to say something else, but instead he grabbed his coat and keys, leaving me in the soft hush of the kitchen. The door shut behind him with a muted thud. I exhaled. The letters rested beneath my palm like a pulse. And for the first time in this house, his house, he always said, I felt the faint spark of something that had once been mine. Control, power, truth. This marriage had failed the test. But I had not. I traced the embossed crest on the envelope with my thumb. Jonathan Drayton's number was printed at the bottom. I knew it by heart. Maybe tonight I wouldn't call, but soon, very soon, the fracture had formed, and once a fracture begins, it can only spread. The house was silent the next morning, too silent. Not peaceful, not serene, but the sort of quiet that feels staged. A quiet that tries to disguise the cracks forming underneath. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, steam curling around the frame as I brushed my hair. Soft light filtered through the frosted window, pale gold and almost kind. My reflection looked unchanged, but I felt different. Something inside me had shifted, even if the surface still appeared calm. My phone buzzed on the counter. A message from Adrian, gone to the gym. Meeting later. Don't wait up tonight. There was no apology, not even a half-hearted attempt. I let the phone go dark and breathed in the scent of lavender soap. Small details grounded me. They always had, but now they also reminded me how small my world had become. How reduced. I touched the edge of the mirror, fingertips leaving faint crescent smudges on the surface. The cool glass steadied my thoughts. A single night was all it took for the memory of his words. Baggage. Nothing special broke, to grow roots that dug into every moment of our marriage. It wasn't just last night. It had been happening for years. I just hadn't let myself see it fully. 2 years ago, it was the first formal dinner I attended with Adrian's coworkers. Everything smelled like truffle oil and polished silver. A chandelier sparkled above us like a trapped galaxy. I had worn a soft blue dress I found in a vintage shop, classic, modest, elegant in its own quiet way. Cassandra's voice had cut through the room like a serrated knife. "Evelyn, dear," she'd said, her smile bright enough to blind. "Where did you get that dress? It looks quaint." She tilted her head, examining me with the sharp precision of someone searching for flaws. Adrian's coworkers leaned in, nosy under the mask of polite smiles. "It's lovely," I said gently. "It's from a thrift boutique a thrift store." Cassandra had let out a dramatic gasp. "Oh, Adrian, sweetheart, why didn't you take her shopping? Surely you earn enough to buy your wife something new." Her voice was syrupy sweet, but the sticky kind that stains everything it touches. Adrian laughed, not a nervous laugh, a genuine one. "I've tried," he said, shaking his head. "But Evelyn likes simple things. Makes her feel connected to her roots, I guess." My roots. I remember choking slightly on my water when he said that. Inside, my thoughts splintered. He didn't know my roots, he had never asked. I had forced myself to smile through the burning behind my ribs. "I like what's comfortable." Cassandra had reached over and patted my hand, a pat that felt more like a shove. "Oh, darling, comfort is what sweatpants are for." Everyone laughed. I felt myself shrink by an inch. Inside, I'd whispered, "Don't react. Don't give them what they want." I thought staying calm was strength. But that night planted the first hairline crack. I walked downstairs slowly, each step creaking softly beneath my feet, the morning light stretching long shadows across the hardwood floor. When I reached the living room, I saw it, the stack of journals I had kept tucked away in the bottom drawer of my desk. I hesitated. Those journals were not meant as evidence. They started as survival, small, private pages where I wrote what I couldn't say out loud. I knelt beside the drawer and pulled it open. The scent of paper and old ink drifted upward, subtle but familiar. I picked up the first journal, dark green with worn edges, and flipped it open. 18 months ago, "Evelyn, do you have to buy that brand of detergent?" Adrian had said, holding up a receipt as if it personally offended him. "It's almost double the price of normal ones." I remembered standing in the kitchen, the soft hum of the refrigerator loud in the tense air. "It doesn't irritate my skin," ID said quietly. "The cheaper brands," he cut me off with a dismissive wave. "Babe, it's detergent, don't be dramatic, we're trying to save money." We were trying. He had just bought a new golf club set that same week. His voice softened just enough to seem gentle but not enough to hide the edge. "Just think about the little things, okay? I work hard. I need your support, not more expenses." I had nodded. But inside, I wondered how detergent became a moral failing. I wondered when my comfort became an inconvenience. And that night, I wrote everything down line by line, word by word. I flipped through more pages, more entries, more small wounds, each one on its own might have seemed insignificant. A raised voice, a rude comment, a dig at my clothing, my hobbies, my silence. But collected together, the pages formed a pattern. A map. A timeline of erosion. My phone buzzed again, another message from Cassandra this time. "Lunch tomorrow, dear. Wear something presentable." My jaw tensed, not from anger, though it simmered beneath the surface, but from the sudden clarity that came with remembering exactly how deeply her words had shaped me. 9 months ago, music played softly in the background, jazz humming like warm honey. We'd been preparing for a small dinner with a few of Adrian's friends. I wore a simple white blouse and dark slacks, nothing flashy but polished. Cassandra walked in uninvited, letting herself through the front door as if the house belonged to her. The smell of her perfume, strong, floral, invasive, filled the foyer instantly. She eyed me from head to toe. "Oh, Evelyn, sweet girl," she said. "Is that what you're wearing? It's very librarian." "I like it," I said. She smiled tightly. "Of course you do." Adrian came downstairs, glanced at me and smirked. "Maybe she should borrow something of yours, Mom. You've got better taste." My heart cracked a little more, just a small fracture. My internal voice whispered, "Why is it always me who has to change? Why must my quietness make me wrong?" But out loud I said nothing, and inside I wrote. I closed the journal gently. The morning light had shifted, warmer now, revealing the dust drifting lazily in the air. The room felt both familiar and foreign, as if I were seeing it from a new angle, a clearer one. Maybe documenting things wasn't just for me anymore. Maybe it had become necessary. I pulled out my phone. I opened a new folder, labeled it Records. Inside it, I created subfolders. Financial control, verbal insults, Cassandra witnesses, receipts and statements. Each one felt like a step forward. Not in revenge, not yet. In reclaiming truth. Slowly, I snapped photos of the journal entries, the dates, the details. My hands were steady, too steady. Finally, I looked around the living room, the place where so much of my silence had lived, and I whispered to myself, "This isn't a marriage, it's a performance." I let the truth settle in the room with me. A marriage built on insults. A mother-in-law who sharpened her cruelty like a knife. A man who puffed himself up by shrinking me. But the cracks were no longer hidden, they were visible and widening. I gathered the journals, sliding them into a tote bag. The soft fabric rustled like a promise. Adrian and Cassandra had spent years sculpting a perfect image. But I had the truth, and truth, once exposed, never goes back to sleep. I stood, lifting the bag onto my shoulder. Its weight felt empowering. "Let the cracks show," I whispered, because soon the whole facade would fall. When Adrian gets excited, he becomes loud, physically loud. His footsteps thud heavier, his gestures grow wider, and his voice pitches up just enough to make the whole house feel smaller. That was the energy I walked into when I came home late that afternoon, tote bag over my shoulder, the weight of journals inside it grounding me like an anchor. He was standing in the living room, sleeves rolled up, tie loose, pacing in front of the coffee table strewn with brochures and wine lists. "There you are," he said as soon as I stepped inside, his tone clipped, impatient. "We need to talk, big news." I set the tote bag down slowly, feeling the faint tug of anticipation in the air. The late sunlight cut through the windows, casting long amber beams across the floor that seemed to divide the room in two, his chaos on one side, my quiet on the other. "What's going on?" I asked. Adrian clapped his hands together in a burst of excitement. "I've decided to host a dinner party. A real one. Investors, partners, clients, big players." I blinked. "When?" "Saturday." It was Wednesday. My thoughts tightened like a thread pulled too fast. He always gave me minimal notice. It made me easier to control, less time to think, push back, or prepare. I crossed my arms gently. "That's very soon." He waved off my concern with a flick of his hand. "You'll handle it. You're good with, the domestic stuff." He smirked as if he'd just praised me. Inside, my mind whispered, "The domestic stuff. The things you boast about to guests but belittle when no one is looking." Out loud, I kept my tone soft. "What exactly do you need me to handle?" "Everything." He started listing tasks like items on a grocery receipt. The menu, the place settings, the floral arrangements, coordinating the catering team. Oh, and make sure the house looks perfect. Not lived in perfect, real perfect. My jaw tightened by a millimeter, a barely there movement. "I see." He studied my face, misinterpreting my stillness as docility. "And Evelyn," he stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I need you to stay quiet and smile. This is important for me, for my career. These men don't want to hear your little opinions." My chest hollowed out in a slow, cold bloom, quiet and smile. The command pressed against my sternum like a weight. "I understand," I said. Internally, the thought echoed sharply. "I understand exactly who you are now." Before I could step away, his phone buzzed. He looked at the screen and brightened. "Perfect. Mom's on her way." Of course she was. And, he added casually, "she's bringing Serena. You remember Serena, right? From the charity gala?" I froze. Serena, the overly polished family friend with the red dress cut to her ribs. The woman who laughed too loudly at Adrian's jokes and touched his arm just enough for me to notice, but not enough for anyone else to accuse her of anything. The woman Cassandra had once described as a better fit for Adrian's social circle. I smoothed my expression. "Why, Mom thinks Serena has good energy," he said vaguely. "And she knows everyone in business. It's good optics." Optics, a convenient word for replacing a wife before actually replacing her. And Adrian added, "She's fun. Investors like fun women." My pulse beat once, slow and sharp. He was doing it openly now, testing boundaries. Seeing how much he could make me tolerate before I broke. "I'll prepare everything," I said quietly. "Don't worry," he relaxed, patting my arm as if I were a helpful assistant. "Good girl." Inside, something old and dormant stirred awake, stretching like an ancient beast, not anger, clarity, not revenge, yet preparation. Cassandra arrived 20 minutes later, unannounced as always, her heels clicking like aggressive punctuation marks on the tile. "Evelyn," she sang, sweeping into the house in a cloud of perfume strong enough to sting my eyes. "I brought help." Behind her strutted Serena. Serena was every inch the woman Cassandra adored, glossy blonde hair, flawless makeup, and a dress that shimmered like champagne. She waved when she saw me, smiling in that dazzling way that never reached her eyes. "Hi, Evelyn," she chirped. "Lovely home, so big." She scanned the foyer with a slow, assessing sweep, lingering as if checking for faults. "You must feel like a little bird in a very large cage." My lips curved politely. "Only when certain guests visit." Cassandra's smile tightened. Adrian descended the stairs at that perfect moment, and just like that, Serena lit up, glowing, preening, smoothing her dress. "Adrian," she exclaimed. "I didn't realize you'd be home so early." He kissed her cheek, in front of me, a casual greeting, he would claim. A social kiss. But I saw the micro-movement. The way his hand hovered at her waist for half a second before withdrawing when he remembered I existed. Cassandra watched me carefully, waiting for a reaction. I gave her none. Inside, I collected details like pearls on a string, every gesture, every insult disguised as civility, every attempt to push me out of the spotlight of my own life. They gathered in the living room to plan the dinner party, meaning Cassandra ordered everyone around while Serena giggled at Adrian's every word. I sat on the sofa with a notebook, writing down the details as instructed. The soft lamp beside me cast a warm glow across the page, creating a small sanctuary of light in the midst of their noise. Cassandra paced in front of the fireplace. The investors are traditional men. They prefer a certain aesthetic, something refined, elevated. She looked at me when she said refined, the implication sharp enough to draw blood. Evelyn dear, she continued, please avoid wearing anything too plain. Investors want to see a wife who reflects success. Serena chimed in, smiling sweetly. Yes, something elegant, maybe not thrift store chic. The derision was subtle but distinct. I inhaled once through my nose, steady. Serena leaned her elbow on the back of Adrian's chair. Don't worry, Evelyn, I can help you pick something. I know what looks flattering on all shapes. My mind whispered, your shape is desperation disguised as confidence. Out loud, I gave her a small smile. Thank you, but I already know what I'll wear. Adrian raised an eyebrow. Just make sure it doesn't look cheap. His words landed softly, too softly. They slid across the room like silk, but they cut like wire. I wrote down the final notes, my hand steady even as something inside me shifted deeper into resolve. Cassandra clapped once. Excellent. This dinner could change Adrian's career forever. I met Adrian's gaze across the room. I'm sure it will, I said, just not in the way you expect. When everyone finally left, the house exhaled along with me, settling into a colder, quieter version of itself. The scent of Serena's perfume lingered faintly in the hallway, sharp, artificial, lingering like a warning. I walked into the study, closed the door behind me, and pulled out the journals again. I wasn't just collecting memories anymore. I was building a case, documentation, patterns, witnesses, receipts, every insult, every command to be quiet, every flirtation with Serena, every attempt from Cassandra to reshape me into their version of acceptable. I opened a fresh page, dinner party, Saturday, investor guests. Cassandra and Serena invited without my consent, told to stay quiet and smile. Public belittling, physical gestures between Adrian and Serena. My handwriting was neat, deliberate, evidence needed clarity. When I finished, I closed the journal gently and placed it in the tote bag. Then I stood in the center of the study, letting the stillness fold around me like a cloak. Adrian thought the dinner party was his grand opportunity. He had no idea it was mine too, not for revenge yet, not for exposure, but for positioning, for preparation, for the beginning of the end. I whispered to the empty room, let them play their roles. Because while they practiced their performance, I was preparing the stage for a different finale altogether. The clinking of crystal glasses was the first warning sign. A delicate, brittle sound, like something inside me was about to shatter. The dining room glowed under the soft gold chandeliers, each droplet of light suspended like molten stars. The long mahogany table gleamed as if freshly varnished, reflecting a distorted version of the people gathered around it. Adrian's investors, their jeweled partners, Cassandra in her electric blue sequin dress, Serena swaying her champagne flute with practiced seduction, and me quiet at the far end, wrapped in silver silk that suddenly felt like armor made of thin paper. Adrian tapped his spoon against his glass again, louder this time. The room stilled. I felt the air tighten around us like a drawn bowstring. I want to thank everyone for coming, he said, puffing his chest as he rose to his feet. Tonight marks a major turning point for our business expansion, and I couldn't be more proud. Applause fluttered like soft wings around the table. He basked in it, eyes gleaming, lips curled with a self-satisfied smirk. I watched him, feeling the faint tremor beneath my own fingertips resting on the linen napkin. Something about him tonight was especially performative, hungry. A man showing off a trophy he hadn't earned. And speaking of pride, Adrian continued, turning toward me with a grand sweeping gesture that made my heart stop for half a second. I want to acknowledge my wife. I lifted my chin. The lights were warm against my cheeks. Everyone looked at me. Then he delivered his blow with a smirk. For putting up with me, he said, while I do all the real work. Soft chuckles. Cassandra snorted. I exhaled silently and tucked an errant strand of hair behind my ear. His words stung, not because I hadn't heard them before, but because he'd chosen tonight, in front of strangers and sycophants, to use them as a punchline. He wasn't done. You know how it is, he told the room, swirling the wine in his glass. Some of us work, some of us, well, he gestured at me lazily, are technically unemployed. Laughter erupted, loud, unfiltered, delighted. Even Serena's laugh cut sharp as glass. I felt my back straighten on instinct, the silk fabric of my dress clinging to my spine. My pulse hammered in my ears. Tiny micro-movements betrayed me, my fingers tightening around my napkin, my shoulders locking, a small swallow pushing down, the metallic taste rising in my throat. Inside, something cracked, not a loud break, but a hairline fracture deep enough to hurt. This is who he chooses to be when eyes are on him. This is who he thinks I am. He continued riding the wave of amusement like a drunk king sitting on a crumbling throne. You all know Evelyn, he said, tapping the rim of his glass again. Always quiet, always in the background. God knows she doesn't contribute financially, but hey, she makes a great audience. More laughter. Cassandra leaned toward the woman beside her. Bless her heart, she whispered loudly, she really tries. My jaw tightened, my breath thinned. This isn't ignorance. This is cruelty he enjoys. I forced my expression into something still, cold, marble-like. I focused on my breathing, the faint floral notes of the table bouquet, the citrus scent of Serena's perfume drifting like a thread across the table, the buttery aroma of the filet mignon cooling on my plate. I felt every second tick against my nerves. They had no idea the cameras were watching them, hidden in the chandelier, behind the flower arrangements, embedded subtly near the fireplace. Even as Adrian continued his monologue, I glimpsed the faintest reflection of the blinking recording light on the silver base of the centerpiece. A reminder. A promise, everything was being captured. His tone, the expressions, the laughter. The world would see this one day. And when they did, they would see exactly what he had made of himself. When the laughter finally fizzled out, Adrian slumped back into his chair, satisfied, sipping from his glass like a man who thought he owned the room. Conversations gradually restarted around us. Though eyes flicked toward me with pity, amusement, or curiosity, I placed my fork down carefully, the tiniest metallic click breaking the silence around my plate. I folded my napkin with deliberate precision, smoothing the creases even as my hands shook slightly beneath the table. Adrian noticed. What? He mouthed silently across the table, widening his eyes with mock innocence. It was a joke. I blinked slowly. I let the silence answer him. My mind, however, was loud, furious, blazing, sharp. You don't even realize what you just lost. The waiter came by with a tray of elegantly plated desserts. My chest tightened as I watched the plates land in front of each guest, delicate slices of hazelnut praline cake dusted with edible gold. You should try it, Cassandra said from across the table, her lips lifting in a smirk. It's expensive. You don't get many things like this, right? I held her gaze. It must be nice, Serena added, swirling her spoon slowly, to live well without ever contributing. Her voice was honeyed poison. My throat felt dry, but my voice, when it came, was steady. Comfort comes in many forms, I said quietly. Even I was surprised by how calm my tone sounded. Serena laughed. That sounded like a fortune cookie. Adrian leaned forward, smirking. Don't go philosophical on us, sweetheart. It doesn't suit you. His words stabbed deeper than I expected. Every day you choose to diminish me. And today you did it with an audience. All around me the murmurs picked back up, the soft clicks of utensils, the hum of shallow conversation, the clatter of glasses. But I heard nothing but the quickening thud of my own heartbeat. The cameras continued their silent witness. Evelyn, an investor's wife, asked politely, leaning toward me, "What do you do with your time? Any hobbies?" Before I could answer, Adrian waved a dismissive hand. She shops at thrift stores, he said. Calls it vintage collecting, but let's be real, it's because she can't tell quality when she sees it. A roar of laughter burst around the table, heat rose up my neck. I gripped the stem of my glass tighter. He wants to make me small. That is his goal, that is his sport. I exhaled through my nose, steady and controlled. His words rolled over me now like waves hitting stone. They could wet the surface, but they could not erode me, not anymore. I pushed my chair back slowly and stood. The motion alone made several heads turn. Adrian stopped mid-sip, brows knitting. Where are you going? He asked. To breathe, I replied. It was the truth, but also the first step of my plan. As I walked toward the side hallway, my heels clicking against the marble like a soft metronome, I felt the weight of 100 eyes on my back. The lighting grew dimmer as I moved farther from the dining room. The hum of conversation faded into a distant vibration. I reached the small alcove near the staircase, a quiet, shadowed space glowing faintly from a sconce on the wall. I rested my hand against the ornate banister, my breath trembled, my vision blurred for a moment. I closed my eyes. I am not weak. I am not worthless. I am not his toy. I am not what he pretends I am. Soft voices echoed faintly from the dining room, more laughter, a burst of clinking glass. Adrian's voice rose above them all, bragging, embellishing, performing. He thought he owned this night. He thought he had broken me, but he had only awakened something dangerous inside me, something sharp and clear. I lifted my head. My plan was set in motion now, there was no going back. Let them laugh, I whispered to myself. They won't be laughing much longer. I turned, smoothing the front of my dress. Then, with my expression perfectly neutral, perfectly composed, I walked back toward the lion's den, every step echoing the promise of the storm to come. Tonight, Adrian had humiliated me. Soon, he would regret ever teaching me how humiliation feels. The moment I stepped outside, the night air sliced through me like a blade, cold, sharp, cleansing. The warmth and noise of the dinner party vanished behind the heavy oak doors, muffled into insignificance. It felt as though I'd crossed a threshold into another world. The mansion's exterior lanterns cast long shadows across the driveway, stretching toward me like dark fingers. I wrapped my arms around myself as a breeze swept in, tugging at my hair and cooling the heat still simmering beneath my skin. My heels clicked against the stone steps in an uneven rhythm. My breath fogged in the air. My pulse was a tight, aching throb, everything inside me felt brittle. I walked faster. By the time I reached the edge of the driveway, I no longer heard the laughter drifting from the dining room, but I still felt it, echoing inside me like a bruise being pressed over and over. He didn't just humiliate me. He enjoyed it. He performed it. He rewarded himself with applause. The final strand of whatever I'd been holding onto snapped. That was the moment I knew I could never go back inside. I pulled out my phone. My hands trembled with cold or maybe fury as I unlocked it and scrolled to a name I hadn't dialed in years, Mr. Alistair Beaumont, Marlowe family attorney. His number had always been there. Waiting, just like I had been. I pressed call. It rang twice. Evelyn, a warm, seasoned voice answered. I hoped I'd hear from you someday. For a beat, I couldn't speak. My throat closed, emotion tangled like wire. Finally, I whispered, I think it's time. A pause, respectful, knowing. Tell me what happened, he said, the floodgates cracked open, not all the way, never all the way, but enough. He humiliated me, I said, voice trembling despite my effort to steady it. In front of investors, their wives. He mocked me, called me useless, unemployed. Cassandra joined in. Everyone laughed. A slow exhale hummed through the speaker. And your cameras? He asked gently. Captured everything. My heart thumped harder as I said it out loud. It made everything real. I have the proof, I have the leverage, I have the truth. Evelyn, Mr. Beaumont said, his voice rich with approval, then you've already done 80% of the test. I closed my eyes as a gust of wind rustled the trees overhead. What's the last 20? I asked. Another small pause, thoughtful, heavy. The test isn't about catching him in the act, he said. It's about showing the board of trustees and yourself that he acted in bad faith over time. That his mistreatment isn't a misunderstanding, it's a pattern. I swallowed hard. It is a pattern, I whispered. It's been happening for years. And now, he said, you have evidence. My breath left me in a shaky exhale, the cameras, the recordings, the emails, the texts, the financial discrepancies he didn't know I'd saved, the emotional insults I'd documented for months, tonight's public humiliation. I had everything. Evelyn, he continued, his tone steady, your parents wanted to ensure your inheritance only went to you if your marriage reflected honesty, mutual respect, and integrity. Adrian has violated all three and repeatedly. If you want your inheritance, you've already met the criteria. A shiver ran through me, not from the cold but from something fierce rising inside my chest, power, control, resolve. I do want it, I said quietly. Not for the wealth, for the freedom. I heard his approving hum. Then the final step, he said, is formalizing the submission. I can meet you first thing in the morning, we'll process everything. Once it's filed with the board, the estate transfers into your sole ownership immediately. My heart slammed against my ribs. Immediately, I echoed. Yes, he affirmed. The mansion you live in, already under the Marlowe name, will legally be transferred to you alone. The rest of the inheritance will follow. The world tilted. Not in a dizzying way, more like a door swinging open after years of being jammed shut. Behind me, the distant sound of muffled laughter spilled from the mansion, a sound that no longer pierced me. He thinks it's his house, I murmured, staring at the windows glowing warmly in the distance. He thinks all of this is his achievement. Mr. Beaumont's voice held a trace of empathy. He will learn otherwise. I nodded slowly, even though he couldn't see me. He is going to fight this, I said. And you will win, Mr. Beaumont replied without hesitation. You have evidence, you have legal grounds, you have the full backing of the trust, and Evelyn, you have grown into someone your mother would be proud of. My breath caught, a rare ache bloomed in my chest, grief and love intertwined. Thank you, I said softly. When can we meet? He asked. Tomorrow morning, I said immediately. First thing, done, and Evelyn. Yes, tonight, leave that place, go somewhere peaceful, you've endured enough. I nodded again as my throat tightened. Good night, Mr. Beaumont. Good night, Evelyn. I ended the call, the silence that followed wrapped around me like a velvet cloak, heavy, comforting, final. For a moment, I simply stood there under the soft glow of the lanterns. My breath hovered in the crisp air. My heart slowed from a frantic gallop to a steady drum. The final step, it was already in motion. I looked back at the mansion, the towering walls, the tall windows, the glittering chandelier inside. Adrian's silhouette moved past one of the windows as he entertained his guests. unaware of the tidal wave that was about to sweep him off his throne. "This is the last time," I whispered to the night. "He laughs at my expense." The wind stirred, as if acknowledging the vow. I turned, heading toward the car waiting in the quiet darkness. Each step felt lighter, clearer, more mine. This wasn't escape. This was preparation. Tomorrow morning, everything would change, and Adrian would never see it coming. The mansion was quiet that evening, though not peaceful. The walls seemed to hum with anticipation, shadows stretching across the polished floors as the sun sank low behind the horizon. I moved through the rooms with deliberate slowness, smoothing the folds of my dress, adjusting the table settings as though nothing had changed. But inside, everything had changed. I had invited Mr. Beaumont to arrive the next evening. His presence would be quiet but commanding, like a ghost silently hovering in the wings while the actors performed their oblivious scene. Everything had to be perfect, calculated, untraceable. The dinner party had been the opening act. Tomorrow would be the stage for the real performance. From the kitchen doorway, I watched Adrian pacing in front of the fireplace. He held a glass of whiskey in one hand, gesturing with the other as he spun stories of his triumphs. Serena sat nearby, laughing at every inflection of his voice, her fingers brushing lightly over his arm, each touch designed to provoke jealousy or submission or both. Cassandra floated around the room, her glittering dress catching the fading sunlight, her voice a soft knife disguised as encouragement. "Adrian, darling," Cassandra said, lowering her voice but not enough for me not to hear, "you really should consider moving Serena into the West Wing. It's more suitable for her elegance." Adrian's grin widened, teeth flashing like polished ivory. "I've thought about it," he said, swirling his glass, "and I think it's time. It's only fair she has a proper space, don't you agree?" I sat silently at the edge of the sofa, hands folded neatly in my lap. My face was calm, neutral, almost serene. But inside, every nerve was taut with awareness. I catalogued their gestures, their words, their ambitions. This wasn't just arrogance. They were constructing their own trap, unaware that I had already set mine. Every word, every motion, every laugh, all of it will be evidence, I reminded myself. "You are calm, you are patient. You are untouchable," Adrian continued, oblivious to my internal monologue. "Imagine the look on the investors' faces when they see the two of us managing both business and domestic harmony." Serena's laugh rose like a delicate bell. "You do know how to keep your audience entertained." I tilted my head slightly, hiding the cold edge beneath the calm. "Domestic harmony, you've been systematically dismantling me for years. And yet here you are, boasting as if your cruelty is charming." Cassandra leaned closer, her perfume a heavy floral note that made me flinch ever so slightly. "It's perfect, Adrian. Serena will fit seamlessly. Evelyn, well, she doesn't mind stepping aside." I smiled faintly, inwardly counting the lies in each word. My smile was a mask, my mind a steel trap. "She doesn't mind. Watch how perfectly wrong they are." The conversation continued, laughter and toasts echoing across the high ceilings. Adrian outlined plans, Serena interjected with soft giggles, and Cassandra nodded in approval, oblivious to the tension growing in the corners of the room. I felt the air in my lungs tight, as I realized how eagerly they were setting the stage for their own undoing. Every boast about Serena, every casual dismissal of me, every assumption that I would remain passive, these were the pieces I needed. I had already compiled evidence: journals, hidden camera footage, receipts, emails. Tonight would only add another layer. I rose quietly and excused myself under the pretense of checking the guest rooms, my heels clicking softly on the marble floor. Upstairs, I walked slowly along the corridor, fingers brushing over the banister, feeling the cool metal beneath my palm. The scent of polished wood and lingering perfume enveloped me, mingling with the faint aroma of candles Adrian and Cassandra had lit to add warmth to the evening. In the privacy of the hallway, I exhaled. My mind worked quickly, rehearsing the steps for tomorrow. Mr. Beaumont would arrive in the afternoon. The formal meeting would be simple but decisive. The attorney would verify the evidence, and I would assert control over the estate. The mansion, the financial assets, the legal authority, it would all shift from their illusion of dominance to my reality. I let my thoughts drift to the dinner party once more, replaying Adrian's smug grin, Serena's coquettish laugh, Cassandra's satisfied nods. Each image sharpened my resolve. They have no idea. Returning to the living room, I placed a fresh glass of water on the side table and sat back down. My posture was casual, relaxed, untouched by the storm raging beneath my skin. Adrian glanced at me, expecting either submission or irritation. I offered neither, instead I offered silence. A calm, unbreakable calm that spoke louder than any words I could have chosen. Everything all right? Adrian asked, a hint of suspicion threading his voice. Perfectly, I said, voice smooth, measured. He raised his glass in a triumphant gesture, turning back to Serena and Cassandra. To progress, to growth, and to perfect partnerships. I mirrored the toast, but inside my smile was not one of agreement. To exposure, to justice, to the reckoning you will never see coming. Hours passed, the party winding down with soft music and polite chatter. Guests departed with handshakes and praises, leaving the three of them in the dim, amber-lit room. Adrian flopped into the armchair, rubbing his hands together with smug satisfaction. Serena perched delicately beside him, and Cassandra reclined with the confidence of someone who believed she had orchestrated every outcome. I rose, walking to the window overlooking the estate gardens. The night was deep now, shadows thick, the faint scent of roses carried by the breeze. I pressed my palms to the cool glass and let the calmness of the night seep into me. Tomorrow, everything changes. Patience, Evelyn. Precision, Evelyn. Silence is your weapon. Let them reveal themselves fully before the storm. I turned back toward them, my expression serene, my eyes calm. They were laughing, making plans, reveling in the illusion of control. And I allowed them to think they were untouchable, because the trap was set. And tomorrow, they would fall into it completely. The house was silent in a way that felt almost unnatural. The lingering warmth of the day had faded, replaced by the faint chill of night seeping through the tall windows. Shadows pooled in corners, stretching across the polished floors like dark ink, and the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen sounded impossibly loud. I moved through the rooms with careful precision, each step deliberate, my heels muffled against the thick Persian rugs. Adrian was somewhere in the study, nursing a brandy and muttering half-formed complaints about dinner and Serena's schedule. He had noticed my silence, of course, but he misread it entirely. Emotional, he would think. Sulking, overthinking, or plotting trivial grievances. He didn't realize that my quiet was a weapon, that every motion I made tonight was a step closer to the inevitable reckoning. I began in the study, pulling the large, leather-bound folder off the shelf. Inside were copies of our prenuptial agreement, meticulously highlighted, tabbed, cross-referenced. I ran my fingers over the pages, the faint scent of ink and polished leather grounding me. Each clause represented more than words on paper, they were shields and levers, tools I could wield with precision. Next came the financial records, neatly stacked in a separate folder. Bank statements, credit accounts, receipts for payments Adrian had claimed as shared expenses, evidence of transfers siphoned under the guise of household management. Each page I examined tightened the coil of strategy inside my chest. Every discrepancy I had noted over the years now formed a lattice of undeniable truth. I moved to a small wooden box beneath the desk, retrieving a flash drive containing hours of discrete video recordings, moments of his impatience, his ridicule, his careless cruelty. Footage captured from hidden cameras during gatherings, private arguments, and moments he thought I wasn't watching. Each clip a testament to his character, each frame a thread in the tapestry of evidence I was weaving. As I organized the materials, I allowed my hands to move methodically, almost ritualistically. Folders stacked neatly, cables coiled with precision, flash drives labeled in my meticulous handwriting. My eyes scanned the documents repeatedly, searching for gaps, inconsistencies, anything that could weaken the case I was about to build. Nothing. Everything was in place. Once the documentation was complete, I turned my attention to the more tangible assets. Jewelry, heirlooms, small personal treasures, items I had accumulated quietly over the years, were gathered and moved to a secure location. I worked with the care of someone handling fragile glass, wrapping each piece in soft cloth and placing it inside a lockbox I had arranged off-site. It was small, almost imperceptible, but the act carried symbolic weight. I was reclaiming control, piece by piece. Throughout this, Adrian's presence in the house was a low-grade pressure against my consciousness. Occasionally, I could hear the scrape of his chair, the muted clink of glass, the sighs as he muttered to himself about Serena or Cassandra. He had begun to notice my calmness, my lack of engagement, the absence of complaints or protestations. "Evelyn," he said finally, his voice calling from the study. "Are you all right? You've been quiet all evening." I remained in the hallway, stacking the final folders. My voice was measured, neutral. "I'm fine." There was a pause, then a dismissive laugh. "Good, just don't go brooding. You'll ruin the atmosphere." Brooding, I thought, suppressing the thrill of inward satisfaction. He calls strategic planning and documentation brooding. I glanced toward the staircase where his shadow lingered, a loose form of arrogance and misplaced confidence. His assumptions were my allies. He would never suspect the meticulous work happening behind the calm facade, the deliberate patience in my every movement. I returned to the study to double-check that all evidence was accounted for. Every flash drive, every folder, every note filed precisely in chronological order. I paused for a moment, resting my palm against the smooth wood of the desk. The faint scent of varnish and paper rose up to meet me. My reflection in the glass of the bookshelf showed a composed woman, eyes alert, lips pressed in a line, but behind that composed exterior, a storm had been brewing for months, now condensed into this single, quiet night. He thinks my silence is fear. He thinks it's indecision. He's wrong on both counts. Adrian wandered closer, leaning against the doorway with the casual arrogance of someone who believes the house, the documents, and the woman standing before him are all under his dominion. "You've been awfully still tonight," he remarked. "Almost like you're thinking too much." I turned slightly, my gaze soft but unwavering. "I'm thinking, yes, just different things than you might imagine." He chuckled, misreading my calm as agitation or melancholy. "Well, don't overthink. You've got nothing to worry about. Just relax, enjoy the evening." Inside, I suppressed a small, imperceptible smile. "Nothing to worry about. You've been building your own trap, not realizing how far the walls of your empire will crumble tomorrow." He wandered off again, muttering something about Serena's arrival for the week and Cassandra's insistence that she be given the east wing to keep the flow balanced. The idea of Serena moving into the mansion had been tossed around lightly all evening, a casual boast designed to provoke jealousy. I felt nothing. No emotion but measured clarity. I returned to the safe corner of the study, double-checking the flash drives and documents. I cataloged them again, ensuring each piece of evidence aligned with a timeline. Emails marked, receipts annotated, videos reviewed for timestamps and clarity. Everything was airtight. In the quiet of the study, I let myself breathe fully for the first time that evening. The house, once a theater of fear and derision, now felt like a chessboard. Every piece in its place, every move anticipated. I allowed my mind to wander briefly to Adrian, oblivious, assuming my silence was temporary, that I would eventually react emotionally, cry or protest. He did not see the calm steel beneath my skin, the careful plotting of my next steps. Let him think it's emotional. Let him think it's brooding. Let him think it's weakness. I placed the final folder in the designated bag, tucking the flash drives securely alongside. Each movement was precise, quiet, deliberate, unseen, unnoticed, unstoppable. By the time I returned to the living room, the atmosphere had shifted subtly. Adrian's confidence had wavered ever so slightly. The silence I carried into the room was a presence, heavy and quiet, and he felt it without understanding why. "You've been distant," he said, attempting casual control. "Something wrong?" I met his gaze steadily, showing only composure. "Nothing at all, just preparing for tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" He echoed, curiosity mixed with mild unease. "Yes," I said softly, each word weighted. "Tomorrow will be very revealing." His eyebrows rose slightly, a faint frown forming. He assumed it was a figure of speech, a vague remark about mood or circumstance. He did not know that the truth behind my words would soon shatter everything he thought he controlled. I moved to the window, glancing out at the darkened estate gardens. The air was crisp, scented faintly with the late bloom of jasmine. I felt a calm determination settle over me, a presence so solid that it radiated through my every movement. This quiet was my power, the storm was coming. But I was ready, and Adrian, arrogant, oblivious, entitled, had no idea what waited behind that calm exterior. The evening arrived with a chill that seemed to sharpen every sound, every movement inside the mansion. The chandeliers glowed with a soft, golden light, casting long, deliberate shadows across the marble floors. Curtains were drawn just enough to let the streetlights mingle with the lamplight, a subtle theatrical effect that made every gesture and glance more pronounced. I had prepared for this night meticulously. Every detail, the placement of guests, the timing of conversations, the subtle positioning of cameras, was calculated for maximum impact. Adrian was in high spirits, oblivious to the fact that he was walking onto a stage of his own making, except the final act would be mine to direct. Serena fluttered around him, a perfectly poised distraction. Cassandra hovered nearby, radiant in her confidence, convinced she had orchestrated yet another social triumph. Guests trickled in, Adrian's friends from the board and their partners, each impeccably dressed, each expectant of the usual display of charm and dominance. I welcomed them with a soft smile, my movements fluid, calm, deliberate. They noticed nothing amiss. They assumed my serenity was my usual composure, my mild disposition, my inability or unwillingness to engage in the brash social games that Adrian relished. Little do they know, I thought, every gesture, every glance, every soft laugh is part of the evidence. Adrian greeted everyone with an easy charm, holding court as if he owned not just the room but the entire world outside it. He caught my eye for a brief moment, eyebrows raising in playful arrogance. I returned the look with calm neutrality, almost imperceptibly letting a shadow of the storm behind my gaze slip through. He blinked, confused, but quickly returned to his performance. Dinner progressed with the expected rituals: laughter, polite debates about wine, subtle boasts about business achievements. I allowed Adrian his moments, letting him bask in the attention, the applause, the small victories that never lasted. My silence was intentional. My calm, deliberate, then at the precise moment, Adrian began the familiar cycle. Of course, none of this would have been possible, he said, gesturing toward me with exaggerated flourish, without my dear wife's support. She's always been so accommodating. His smile was mocking, polished. Though I suppose, technically, she isn't contributing much financially, but she has a certain presence, yes. Laughter rippled across the table. Serena tittered beside him. Cassandra leaned in, her eyes sparkling with malicious delight. I inhaled slowly, letting the sound of the laughter wash over me, sinking deep into my awareness. My lips curved in the faintest, perfectly measured smile. My hands rested lightly on the table, fingers brushing the polished surface in a slow, deliberate rhythm. Let them see it all. Let them laugh one last time. Every witness, every word, every gesture is part of the record. Every mockery will be documented, remembered, stored. Adrian's voice rose, louder, eager. She insists on keeping a low profile, you know. A quiet little corner in the mansion, making her subtle contributions. Honestly, sometimes I forget she's even there. More laughter. A few polite gasps from new guests, impressed by his wit. I nodded slightly, my eyes calm, unmoving. Internally, I catalogued each response, each nuance, each inflection. Every one of you will see the truth soon enough. A waiter moved discreetly, refilling glasses and delivering hors d'oeuvres. I reached for a glass of water, fingers brushing the cool crystal. The movement was casual, unremarkable, but it was precise, deliberate. I was composed, almost ethereal in my serenity. The contrast made Adrian's antics look childish, brutish, and thinly veiled cruelty. "Evelyn," Adrian said, leaning forward, voice coated with faux charm, "don't be so serious, it's all in fun." I allowed a faint, polite laugh to escape. "Of course," I said softly, tone light, almost airy. He leaned back, satisfied. Satisfied because he believed he had punctured my composure, elicited an emotional response. He had no idea that every syllable he spoke, every glance, every smirk, was a thread in the net I was weaving around him. Across the room, Cassandra's expression was one of smug triumph. Serena's laughter rang sharp, flitting through the air like fine glass. Yet my calm, my neutrality was the invisible anchor. It unnerved Adrian more than any confrontation could. He noticed it, the lack of agitation, the absence of insulted gasps, the serene, unwavering presence. But he misinterpreted it. "She's emotional, she's withdrawing. She'll break soon." He did not understand that calm is more dangerous than fury. I allowed him one more flourish, one more mocking jab. Really, she should consider investing some of her energy in something productive. You know, making herself useful. The laughter erupted again, louder, more cruel. I felt the tiny tremor of satisfaction in the pit of my stomach, almost imperceptible. This was it. This was the moment I had orchestrated, allowing Adrian to reveal the full extent of his arrogance in front of everyone who mattered. Every friend, every colleague, every witness was in place. Every camera, hidden in plain sight, captured the performance. I lifted my glass and sipped slowly, deliberately, letting the sound resonate softly in the room. My eyes never left Adrian's, neutral, calm, unreadable. He smiled, oblivious to the growing tension, believing he had bested me one final time. "This is your stage, Adrian. Your arrogance, your cruelty, your misplaced confidence, all of it. You performed it beautifully. And it will be your undoing." I turned slightly, pretending to glance at a tray of desserts, subtly pressing the button on a discreet remote. Cameras in the room shifted slightly, capturing perfect angles, ensuring every word and gesture was recorded. The equipment was invisible, but its presence solidified my control. The night stretched on, Adrian boasting, Serena laughing, Cassandra nodding. And I, Evelyn Marlowe, remained calm, poised, untouchable. The room was my chessboard, every mocking word, every laugh, every gesture a move I had anticipated and prepared for. When the gathering finally began to wind down, Adrian leaned back in his chair, still smug, still oblivious. I rose, gathering my napkin, my composure intact. The storm had not yet broken, but the stage was set. Every player was in position, every witness had seen, every piece of evidence was captured. And tomorrow, the curtains would rise on the reckoning Adrian could never have imagined. The morning sunlight filtered through the tall windows of the mansion, golden and sharp, illuminating every corner of the grand living room where last night's echoes of laughter still lingered. Today, the house felt different, charged, tense, as if the walls themselves knew the storm was about to descend. My pulse was steady, my breathing calm. I moved through the space with quiet authority, fingers brushing lightly over the polished surfaces, observing the subtle tremor of anticipation that had already begun to ripple through the air. Adrian entered shortly afterward, as if the day were ordinary. His steps were confident, even cocky, but there was a flicker in his eyes, a tiny recognition that something was off, though he could not yet place it. Serena trailed behind, her heels clicking against the marble, while Cassandra hovered nearby, radiating faux excitement. They expected a normal morning meeting, a simple consultation about the estate. They did not anticipate the reckoning that waited. I motioned to a polished mahogany table where Mr. Beaumont stood, his presence calm, unyielding, and impeccably professional. He carried a large envelope, the deed to the Marlowe estate, and a meticulously organized stack of documents detailing the prenup violations. Every piece of paper had been reviewed, verified, and timestamped. Every secret Adrian thought was hidden was now laid bare, ready for the world to see. "Good morning," Mr. Beaumont said, his voice calm but commanding. "Thank you all for gathering here. Today, we are formalizing the transfer of ownership for the Marlowe estate. And more importantly, reviewing evidence of breaches in the marital agreement that have significant legal consequences." Adrian laughed nervously, trying to mask the tightening in his chest. I'm sure this is just a formality, yes? Right, Evelyn?" His smile was forced, strained. He looked at me, expecting confusion, hesitation, perhaps even pleading. Instead, he found only calm. My eyes met as steadily, unflinching. "Yes," I said softly, deliberately. "Today we are finalizing everything. It's time to be clear about ownership and responsibility." A hush settled over the room. Serena's face paled slightly. Cassandra's confident smile faltered. Adrian shifted, suddenly aware that this was no ordinary meeting. He scanned the room, noticing the cameras discreetly positioned, the evidence in plain sight. But it was too late for him to reclaim any control. Mr. Beaumont opened the envelope with deliberate care, pulling out the first document, the deed. The sunlight glinted off its embossed lettering. He held it high for all to see. "This," he said, voice firm, "is the deed to the Marlowe estate. Effective immediately, Evelyn Marlowe is the sole legal owner of the entire property, including this mansion, all grounds and assets contained herein." A stunned silence filled the room. Adrian's mouth opened and closed once, twice, like a fish out of water. Serena let out a sharp intake of breath. Cassandra's hand flew to her mouth, eyes wide with disbelief. "I what?" Adrian stammered, voice cracking slightly as he struggled to regain composure. This isn't possible." Adrian," Mr. Beaumont interjected, calm and unwavering. "The transfer has been executed in accordance with the Marlowe Family Trust, following the full assessment of the marital agreement and its provisions. As such, you no longer have legal access to this property or any associated assets." I let my gaze sweep over him, neutral, composed, the embodiment of controlled inevitability. Adrian's face paled further. His confidence, his arrogance, his sense of entitlement, all stripped away in an instant. "Evelyn," Mr. Beaumont continued, producing a second stack of documents, "we will now review documented breaches of the prenuptial agreement. These include misappropriation of funds, misrepresentation of financial contributions, and repeated emotional and financial abuse." Adrian's jaw tightened. "That's not accurate. Everything has been verified," Mr. Beaumont said, voice firm. "Emails, receipts, hidden recordings, and financial documents all confirm the breaches. These violations render any prior assumptions about joint ownership void. You are legally obliged to vacate the premises immediately." The words hung in the air, sharp and undeniable. Adrian's entire body stiffened. He looked to Serena and Cassandra, seeking support or reassurance, but found none. The realization was sinking in. The empire he believed he controlled had evaporated beneath him. I rose slowly from my seat, stepping closer to the table where the deed lay. My voice was soft but deliberate. "This house, this estate, everything my parents entrusted to me, is mine. Not because I wanted to take it from anyone, but because it was never meant for someone like you, Adrian. someone who treats marriage as a game, a performance, a platform for cruelty. Adrian's hands shook slightly as he reached for the deed, but Mr. Beaumont held it firmly, preventing any contact. I don't understand, Adrian whispered, disbelief thick in his tone. You will understand, I said quietly, my eyes unwavering, that actions have consequences, that the mockery, the humiliation, the lies, they all have weight. And the law in this case sides with integrity, not arrogance. Serena's face drained of color, and Cassandra's carefully constructed confidence crumbled under the weight of reality. Adrian slumped slightly, a man stripped of control, every inch of his posture defeated. You are ordered to leave this property immediately, Mr. Beaumont said, producing a formal notice. Access will be restricted to authorized personnel only. Any attempts to interfere with the estate's management will be treated as legal violations. Adrian's voice was hoarse now. I can't this. This is my home. No, I said, calm and unyielding. It was always my home. I felt the weight of every year, every insult, every slight finally lift. The calm that had carried me through months of meticulous planning now radiated fully. The cameras captured it all. The shock on Adrian's face, Serena's faltering stance, Cassandra's unraveling composure, and the quiet, unwavering authority in my demeanor. Adrian turned toward me, eyes wide, a mixture of anger, disbelief, and a faint glimmer of fear. You set me up, he said, voice trembling. I shook my head slowly. No, Adrian, you set yourself up. I merely followed the rules, documented your actions, and waited for the truth to be undeniable. He staggered back toward the door, hands shaking, shoulders slumped. Each step was measured, controlled, a bitter march into the reality he had refused to see for years. As he reached the threshold, I felt a profound, quiet descend over the room. The estate, once a stage for his arrogance, now belonged entirely to me. Every corner, every artifact, every treasured possession mine. Not because I had taken it with force, but because I had earned it through patience, intelligence, and integrity. The cameras continued to roll, capturing the moment, preserving the truth for any who might doubt it. Adrian paused briefly at the doorway, eyes lingering on me, a final mixture of rage and defeat before stepping out. The door closed behind him with a firm, undeniable click. I exhaled slowly, letting the tension leave my body in a long, steady breath. Sunlight shimmered off the polished floors, the chandeliers casting warm reflections across the walls. The air seemed lighter, freer, as if the house itself was acknowledging the shift in ownership, the restoration of order. I turned to Mr. Beaumont, a small, private smile touching my lips. Thank you, I said quietly. It was always yours, Evelyn, he replied. You merely had to prove it to the world and to yourself. I allowed myself a brief moment of satisfaction, standing tall, poised, unbroken. The storm had passed, and the estate, the legacy, the life my parents entrusted to me were finally in my hands. Adrian had laughed at me, mocked me, humiliated me. But now every echo of that cruelty lay exposed, documented, and defeated. I had endured. I had waited. And finally I had claimed what was rightfully mine. The house was silent for the first time in years. I walked through the grand hallway, the polished floors reflecting the soft morning light streaming through the towering windows. Each step echoed softly, a quiet affirmation of ownership, of control regained. For years, I had moved through this space feeling small, overshadowed, diminished. Now every room, every corner, every gleaming surface whispered my name, welcoming me as its rightful owner. Adrian had left hours ago, the door closing behind him like a punctuation mark on the chaos he had created. I had filed for divorce immediately after the attorney finalized the deed transfer. Every motion, every document, every detail had been prepared meticulously in advance, so that there would be no loopholes, no bargaining, no chance for him to manipulate the outcome. He had tried, of course. A flurry of texts, then phone calls. Begging, threatening, bargaining. He had promised wealth, compromise, pleading like a man cornered by his own arrogance. But I had ignored it all. Every message was a reminder of the truth. His power over me had ended the moment I claimed my inheritance, the moment I realized my strength had always been within me, waiting to awaken. Cassandra had collapsed into despair shortly after, her usual confidence shattered like glass underfoot. She had called me, begging explanations, pleading for some intervention. I had listened calmly, the faintest trace of pity in my tone. This is not my fight anymore. This is simply the reckoning for those who believed cruelty could be invisible. Serena, she vanished as quietly as she had arrived. Not a word, not a trace, as though the mansion itself had swallowed her up, leaving no memory behind. Her absence was a silent acknowledgement. There was no place for her here, no room for manipulation or deceit. I moved from the foyer to the study, hands trailing along the smooth wood of the desk, tracing the familiar contours. The room had been my sanctuary once, and now it was mine again, fully, without interruption. I opened the drawers, checking my carefully cataloged documents, flash drives, and ledgers. Everything remained intact, secure, and in order. The proof of every injustice was documented, ready if ever it needed to be revisited, but I knew I wouldn't need to. The law had been clear. The truth undeniable. I wandered through the living room, fingers grazing the velvet of the sofas, the polished surface of the coffee table. I inhaled the faint scent of waxed wood and lingering candle smoke, savoring the quiet dominance of a space finally wholly mine. Each room told its own story. The kitchen of careful preparation, the dining room of strategies laid out and observed, the drawing room of performances ended and masks removed. This house has seen my humiliation, my endurance, my patience, I thought. And now it witnesses my victory, my calm, my reclamation. Upstairs, I paused outside the master bedroom, my hand resting lightly on the doorframe. For years, this had been a room of tension, of arguments muffled behind closed doors, of silent tears I had shed in private. Now it was a room of possibilities. I opened the door and stepped inside, letting the soft light fall across the bed, the polished nightstands, the floor reflecting a quiet elegance. For the first time, it felt like home, not because Adrian had ever been here, not because of appearances or societal expectations, but because it was mine. I moved through the bedrooms, the library, the art room, the study upstairs. Every door I opened, every corner I observed, felt like a reclaiming of self. Each step reinforced the truth. I was no longer the underestimated wife, the silent observer, the patient woman hiding in the shadows. I was the authority here. I was the steward of my family's legacy. I was Evelyn Marlowe, and no one could diminish that again. I paused at the balcony, the cool morning air brushing my face. Below, the gardens stretched in careful symmetry, manicured and immaculate. The estate had always been magnificent, but now it radiated a deeper significance. It was a symbol of my patience, my strategy, my triumph. The wind carried the scent of roses, faint and persistent, and for a moment I closed my eyes, letting the stillness and clarity of the morning fill me completely. I am no longer silent, I thought. I will speak when necessary. I will act with authority. I will live with dignity and purpose. And I will never allow anyone to define me again. Returning inside, I paused at the grand staircase, hands resting on the polished railing. The house, empty but alive with memory, welcomed me. The laughter that once humiliated me had been replaced by a silence that was stronger, heavier, more potent. Every echo, every shadow, every silent corner was mine to shape, to command, to cherish. I allowed myself a quiet smile. Not triumphant in a loud, performative way, but serene, measured, full of the calm satisfaction of someone who has endured and emerged victorious. I had been underestimated, mocked, overlooked. But now I moved through the mansion with complete awareness, every step a testament to patience, strategy, and self-possession. The future stretched ahead, bright, unbroken, and entirely mine. I had learned that power is not always loud. Sometimes it is patient, silent, and undeniable. And now, for the first time, it was fully mine to wield. I paused in the grand hallway, sunlight streaming across the floors, warmth on my skin, and whispered softly to myself, "This is just the beginning."